Hello, students, and hello, your parents and your teachers, and also Rishi Sunak. I'm talking about student loans, and I think I'm going to say something which will be of interest to all of you. I'm going to be very provocative. I'm going to suggest to you that student loans are a good idea, that they offer a dodgy prospectus, that they have two built-in bear traps, that they're built on a foundation of sand, and they ignore nature, where animals feed their own. And of course, they cost megabucks. I also suggest to you that this month, which is an awful, awful time, and hopefully will not be repeated, that we should use it. You should use it. I said last time, for brain exercise as well. This will give you a brain exercise. I can't get everything I want to say into one session, so I'm dividing it up into two. The first will define what I'm saying is wrong, and the second will show you the avenue that I offer you to produce a happy ending, because I think it's important that we should all look beyond COVID to what follows and look for happy endings. So I will, if you can stay with me, I will offer you an optimistic scenario to contemplate, but you'll have to be patient before you reach that stage. Let me begin with a little story which really encapsulates what it is that I'm saying to you. It's anecdotal. Two guys go to see their doctor, and one guy has got a bad hand, a sore hand, and the other one has got a very sore foot. And the doctor examines the first guy and says, well, I'm terribly, terribly sorry, I can't do anything for you. And then he examines the second guy and he says, oh my God, I really, really must do something for you. And the guy said, well, can you help me? He said, yes, I can, but it will be a little painful. So, well, you know, can it start? Yes, you can start now if you want. So, yes, please. So he said, well, just come here. And the guy steps in front of him and he hits him right on the point of his nose. He says, there you are, you can't feel the pain in your foot at all, can you? Well, I'm sure you'll see very soon what it is that I'm getting at. Before I launch into this, if I've still got the attention of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, just a quick word separately in his ear. The first is to thank him very much for the money he's given to Sage Gateshead and Royal Northern Symphonia Orchestra, and also the Tyneside Cinema, which will be very gratefully appreciated in this part of the world, and certainly by me and my wife. But secondly, I just want to mention students. Because he hasn't mentioned students. And I just put a little humble suggestion to him. I think it's true that universities have been opened as much for the sake of the universities as for the students. And a lot of you could have stayed at home and studied online and saved yourself a bob or two. Well, I humbly suggest that the Chancellor of the Exchequer should give you £2,000 credit off your student loan to compensate. And you can calculate the extra sort of benefit in reduced interest if he did do that. And I'm sure it only requires a little adjustment to the books in the Treasury to bring that about. But that's by the way. Let's get back to the nitty-gritty of this matter of student loans. The one thing that the Chancellor certainly knows, and I don't know whether you know the scale of it, well, the amount that has been loaned in the UK is over £100 billion, and in America over $1 trillion, so it is mega bucks. And in Yorkshire, they would be saying very simply, well, is it value for money. It's in question. Let me just start this way. Here's an article which was in the Times not very long ago, and it's headed "Millennials all over the world have lost faith in democracy." And then in the narrative, this is what it said: inequalities in wealth and income, the difficulty of climbing onto the property ladder, the burden of student debt, and a greater dependence on support from parents have created a perception that the chances of failure in life depend less upon hard work and enterprise and more upon inherited wealth and privilege. Well, now, I mean, the object of this exercise is social mobility, and I think all three parties subscribe to social mobility. Is it achieving it? I'm going to call in aid here this guy, Sir Fred Robinson. Now, tragically, he died in August at the age of 70. But in his lifetime, he was widely applauded, and he said many wise things. And insofar as I'm talking about education today, I'm drawing upon his thoughts. And I'm very pleased to echo them and to hold his baton for a short time. He may have been applauded, but his words fell on deaf ears. So his words actually are a very good place to start this podcast. This is what he wrote. Creativity is essential to the success and fulfillment of young people, to the vitality of our communities, and to the long-term health of the economy. He uses words like creativity and fulfillment, which is the words that I would use when I talk about winners and losers. He took a view that every child actually has within him or her creativity, and every child should feel that they can be fulfilled. Well, now, let's measure student loans against that. Well, the first thing I have to say is that they only apply to half the school population who can go to university, who want to go to university. They ignore the other half, and worse than that, they make them feel a failure because they haven't succeeded. Now, he, in fact, draws exactly the same conclusions I've drawn for some time, and that is that millions of kids are diagnosed, not just in the UK, millions of kids are diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity and fed with Ritalin. Well, if you feed a child food it doesn't like, it throws a tantrum. If you feed a child intellectual food it doesn't like, it also throws a tantrum, and you give it Ritalin. The only beneficiaries of this, well, there are two sets of beneficiaries of this. One are the drug companies who provide the stuff, and the other are the teachers who get a quieter class. But I have the mischievous thought that the people who really should get the Ritalin are the teaching establishment. They've failed to give attention to the cause of this. I am now going to draw upon my own experience here. I'm going to relate to my own company, but I must tell you that I have absolutely no financial interest in this company. Since I retired in 1993, I have not had a single penny invested in them, as I gave up my entrepreneurial days then, and this basis that what I can't make up, I better not risk. But it's an interesting story, and I think you'll find it challenging in lots of different ways. This is a picture of the company that I didn't want to join, frankly, in 1952. A-Share and Sons Limited. A-Share, by the way, is my grandfather, who came to this country. He was welcomed as an immigrant from Riga in the 1880s, and it probably opened up with a barrow then. He died in 1927. He'd be rather shattered to see what has happened since, because that company that I turned my back on in 1952, thinking that I was going to be a lawyer, has ended up as this company, but with 101 other branches. Now that in 1952, the turnover, I guess, must have been about £50,000. The turnover now is £300 million. And it employs 1,500 people. Another remarkable thing, which I may as well just record here, is that it boasts the fact that over 220,000 of its customers on Trustpilot reviews have recorded them as excellent or good, over 90%. And I've got to say that when I entered the furniture trade to begin with, that wasn't the sort of response that the furniture trade generally would get from the way they treat their customers. But that's by the way. And just one further little snippet here. This picture, Leslie Sheraton, celebrating here 40 years service to the company, starting out trained by my mother and serving as PA to a number of people who've actually headed up the management of the company, and now as assistant company secretary of a PLC. Now, why do I mention all of this? It's simply this, because although it's possible to divide people up between haves and have-nots, and to think of success as sort of being a mega millionaire or something, or a prime minister or whatever, there are people within that company who have succeeded in their lives, they've been fulfilled and so on. And not through any academic achievement as such. So I divide the world not between haves and have-nots, between the brainy and the bushy-tailed, the bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And oddly enough, I don't think I am one of the brainy lot. I think we've all got brains, but brainy is a different thing. My wife's brainy. I mean, she went to Newcastle for a second degree in law and made a much better stab at it than I did, and was able to help her clients in the Citizens Advice Bureau, Tribunal Citizens Advice Bureau, to get their claims met. But let me explain what I mean by brainy. You'll follow what I mean when I illustrate it. If you go into a chemist shop, you'll see around the walls lots and lots of pills. Well, there's no way that I could remember all the names of those pills, or would wish to. And they're dealing with the human anatomy. There's no way I can know all the details of the human anatomy. Go into a garden centre. No way I know all about the names of all the plants and flowers that are there. You go into a classroom, sometimes you see a whiteboard or a blackboard with all these hieroglyphs of X's and Y's on. There's no way that I can contemplate that. You've got your iPhone. Well, I mean, I enjoy using and speaking and seeing somebody in the States as I talk, but I haven't got a clue as to how it all works. I'm just thoroughly pleased that it does. So the people who do all of that are brainy, and they certainly need um, 3 or more years in a university to learn what it's all about. The bright-eyed and bushy-tailed lot haven't got the time for that. But when I spoke to Leslie Sheraton just a week or two ago, and I said, is it still her experience that that fundamentally the company doesn't need graduates? She said, well, yeah, well, it is and it isn't. He said, because one of our numbers just had a 1-year course as a retail directorship course. And there's the clue to what I'm going to be saying later on, that you see, you should not ignore this sector of the economy. And the trouble with the student loan is that it is on the proposition that you want to get people to university for 3 or more years. I mean, that's maybe 2 people are talking about now, but certainly most people should be there for 3 or more years. So that's the proposition that it's based upon. And I think it omits altogether the people who are in this category of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, who should not be forgotten. You see, I have this view when it comes to social mobility, that you don't divide the world up by haves and have-nots, but by winners and losers. And the more winners you have, the fewer losers. And that's how you actually get social mobility. But we'll come on to that later on. Now let's look at the prospectus that it offers. Well, once upon a time, it's true that if you went to university, it was a guarantee of pretty well a guarantee of a job and a job for life. But you know now that that is not the case. It isn't the case at all. You may find it difficult to get a job, and if you get it, it may be difficult to keep it. In addition to that, if you've got a debt of 40 or 50,000 pounds on your back, I think it's a bit like riding a bike or driving a car with the brakes on. It makes it that bit more difficult to get a mortgage or to put money into a pension or to enjoy some of the things that are good in life. And that's not a good thing. So that's part of the disadvantage. But there's also the bear traps. There are 2 bear traps that I can identify. I think there's work here for those who are studying philosophy, politics, and economics. We'll deal first of all with those studying economics. The retail price index is factored into your into the repayment of your loans to calculate the interest. Well, now, that's not a problem when interest rates are low and when the cost of living is pretty stable. But the talk now is of allowing costs to rise and getting a bit of inflation in the system so that the overall indebtedness that this country is incurring can be reduced. Well, inflation is fine if you can keep pace with it, but it's terrible if you can't. And your student loans, as it currently structured, would not keep pace with inflation. So I put that to you as a bear trap. There is another bear trap, and it's equally serious. There is a name for it, and that is debt slavery. Debt slavery, that is when, yes, you have a job, and it's a well-paid job, but you don't like it. And you're asked to do things you totally dislike. You can't afford to give it up because you've got a family to feed. And if there are lots and lots of people like that, well, that explains how people like Hitler got away with it in Germany, if you think about it. Debt slavery is serious. Now, I know you get worked up about the slavers of the past, but I think also you should be concerned about the slavers of today. And now I come to the for your philosophers. Don't ignore philosophy, for heaven's sake, because I want to talk about the word equality. I think equality is a mischief word. Equality can be a very good word when you're talking about anti-apartheid, or when you're talking about votes for women, or when you're talking about discrimination of any sort. Equality is absolutely the right word. But for quite some time, I've been saying that we're equal only sometimes. We're unequal most times, and we're different always. And especially in education, where everybody is different. And you shouldn't think you can just treat everybody the same way and equalize them and homogenize them. I'll give you a simple illustration. There are some children who are born PMLD, profound and multiple learning difficulties. And there are other kids who are born gifted and talented. Well, there's no way you can equalize them, level them. They're different. And the words that you use when you're dealing with them are compassion on the one hand and fair play on the other. And you're sensitive to the fact that the society badly needs the people who are gifted and talented. And if you give them aid and help in some ways, that you're promoting inequality. It goes more than that. There is this statement, which I subscribed to when I was young, that the essence of education was equality of opportunity to go to university. Well, I've got to say, is it? I had the revelation there, again, outside my university degree course. I had it when I became the governor of the Barbara Priestman School in Sunderland. Now, I just remind you that as a member of my local Rotary Club, I met Fredwin Haynes, who was the head teacher of the special school, a great school of special needs. I mean, one of the satisfactions in my life is I helped to keep the school alive, helped the parents in their campaign to keep the school alive. It was a very, very vibrant school. I mean, this is one picture that I've got from many, which shows the sort of school that it was. There they were celebrating the fact that 2 kids had gone to the Sydney Paralympics and come off with silver medal prizes. Now, what I want to refer to here is this, that there was a meeting of parents called by the Director of Education to sell the idea of inclusion, to give kids the right to go to mainstream schools. If you think about it, that's what the point of it. And at the end of that meeting, not one single hand went up in favour of the closure of that school. They valued it enormously. But it isn't just that they valued it, they didn't want the alternative. They didn't want to go mainstream where most likely the kids would be bullied. They didn't want the kids to get a curriculum which would have set them for a course for a university which they were not going to go on. That's not what they wanted. They didn't want, this is what I'm getting at, they did not want equality of opportunity to go to university. All they wanted was opportunity. And that's where I say fair play is a better word to use sometimes than equality. I'll give you another example. Parity of esteem. Um, well, the fact is that to get parity of esteem, um, polytechnics and technical colleges were closed, um, and diplomas there ended so that everybody could have a chance of a degree. But is parity of esteem the right thing to go for? I'll, I'll just ask a precise question. Um, the legal profession, my favourite profession, as you'll discover. But the fact is that I esteem some lawyers very highly. I don't esteem all lawyers, and I don't esteem people because they are lawyers. The two, it's wrong to simply esteem people because of the group that they belong to. Self-esteem is the right thing to think about. Again, I got this lesson in Barbara Priestman's school. Um, I have a heroine. The heroine is a pupil in that school called Ashley Ritchie. She was an extremely feisty pupil, and when I first met her, here she is campaigning with the parents. They got 14,000 reasoned objections to closure. Well, it was difficult for anybody to argue against that. Um, but there she was, a feisty pupil. And well, she's still a friend. We were invited to her wedding recently, and I've got a couple of photographs from the wedding that tell a story. This first one, this is Ashley dancing at her wedding, and she took her husband to be to Dance City in Newcastle to learn how to dance with someone in a wheelchair. But the most important picture is this one, because she had at her wedding the teachers who'd actually helped her to be the person that she was. And she has self-esteem. She has no pity for herself in any way at all. And I mean, the success story was not just her success story, but the success story of their teachers. I mean, one girl there became a head teacher. So that's where success can lie in life if you go for it. So I tell you again, equality is not the dream for many people. They want to be successful in their lives. Well, I've got to say one other thing while I'm about it, if you like, and that is, oddly enough, it's a case where I support equality and egalitarians probably don't. I'm talking about the public and the private sector. But I think, again, if you're going to think about education, you've got to be thinking about who you're educating for what. And, well, some people believe public sector good, private sector bad, because it's contaminated by money and profit. Well, let's just think around that for a moment, because I say that you must orientate yourself for the big wide world outside. And you take SCS, for example. In that situation, they're all winners. The staff, especially those who've stayed loyal to the company, they are winners for sure. The people who've invested in the company, including pension funds, they've been winners, considering the scale of that company's progress. The manufacturers have been winners, and the customers have been winners. There haven't been losers. So I've got to say, those people who subscribe that the problem is profit have got it all wrong. Because without profit, nothing. Sine qua non. Without profit, there is nothing. None of that could have happened if they hadn't generated profit. The truth is that the public sector and the private sector are identical. that they both of them have got to meet the needs of the society. The only difference is that in the private sector, if you fail to meet those needs, you go bust. But in the public sector, you carry on regardless and try to protect your jobs. That's the difference. I mean, take furniture, for example. All those names, you know them, you remember them. Maples, Wades, Waringillo, Cantors, Callers, I don't know, lots of names. They've gone because they failed to meet the needs. But the problem really, if you really analyze it out, is power and the misuse of power, the greed for power, and money, yes, when it is power. That's, if you want to study this thing in any great detail, that's where your problem lies. Well, I hope I've said enough to make you think around the subject of student loans as they currently are. And in the next part of my podcast, I will give you an alternative approach to this whole thing. But let me end this way. As I said, my wife is the brainy one, and she keeps buying me books. And she's brought me this one, How to Stay Sane in an Age of Division by Elif Shafak. And I turn to the end of it, where it says, after the pandemic, we won't go back to the way things were before, and we shouldn't. What we call the beginning is often the end is where we start from. T.S. Eliot, Little Gidding, 4 quartets. Now, ironically, that rings a bell with me because in my book, Death of a Nightingale, I again quoted in the prologue 4 quartets, T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration. At the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Well, in one sense, that's right. That's what's happened to me. But even that isn't quite right, because the place isn't the same. Never mind anything else. The place is, and you need something that acknowledges the changes that have taken place in the world and are changing all the time. So in the next part of this podcast, and I hope to have it with you very soon, we will see how you can get more winners and thereby fewer losers. And that is really what all of this is about. Thank you for listening to me today. Thank you very, very much and come back very soon.